Our first story for tonight was sent in by a man living in Del Rio, Texas. The store sat along a highway where traffic became almost non existent after midnight. Most nights were boring. Truckers stopped for coffee, travelers came in for gas. People from nearby ranches occasionally stopped for cigarettes or something to drink. Marco had worked enough closing shifts that being alone didn't bother him anymore, until one customer walked through the door shortly before closing and started asking questions that no customer should have asked. Questions about the cameras, the back entrance, and whether Marco was working alone. Marco thought the man had left. He hadn't. This is his story. My name is Marco. This happened in 2014 when I was 23. At the time, I was taking classes during the day and working evenings at a convenience store outside Del Rio. I'm not going to give the actual name of the store. It's still there, although I think it has different owners now. The store wasn't directly in town. You had to drive several miles out. There were ranch properties scattered around the area, but there wasn't much immediately next to us. We had 6 gas pumps, a little convenience store, ice machine outside, dumpster behind the building. That was basically it. Across the highway was an empty dirt lot. Behind us was mostly brush. During the day, we stayed pretty busy. At night, that's a completely different story. We closed at midnight. Usually after 11, I could go 20 or 30 minutes without seeing anyone. Sometimes longer. I actually liked working late. I'd clean, restock the refrigerators, make fresh coffee for the morning crew, listen to music. It was easy money. My manager was a woman named Teresa. On the night this happened, Teresa left around 10:30. Before she left, she reminded me that there was a cash deposit that needed to go into the safe. The store had a drop safe in the office. At closing, I counted the drawer, prepared the deposits, and put everything in the safe. I never carried money home. That's important. At around 11:40, I was mopping near the fountain drinks when I heard the bell above the door. I looked up, and a man had walked in. I'd guess he was somewhere in his late 40s or early 50s. Baseball cap, faded denim shirt, jeans. Nothing about him looked particularly strange. I said, "Evening." He nodded. He walked towards the refrigerators. I went back to mopping. After maybe a minute, he came to the counter with a bottle of water and a pack of beef jerky. He paid cash. Normal transaction. Then he asked, "What time do y'all close?" I told him midnight. He looked at the clock. It was about 11:45. Then he said, "You stay here by yourself this late?" That caught my attention. I didn't want to tell him I was alone, so I said, "Manager's in the back." That was a lie. He looked towards the hallway behind the counter, then back at me. Every night, I laughed a little and said, "Depends." He didn't laugh. He picked up his water. Then he looked toward one of the security cameras in the corner. Those things actually work. Now I was uncomfortable. I said, "Yeah, all of them." That wasn't entirely true. One camera covering the side of the building hadn't worked properly in months, but he didn't need to know that. He nodded slowly, then asked, "Got cameras out back too?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He smiled. "I'm asking because somebody messed with my truck at a gas station once." I said, "Yeah, cameras are everywhere." Another lie. Then he asked one more question. "The back door stays locked?" At that point, I stopped pretending the conversation wasn't weird. I said, "Is there something I can help you with?" He stared at me for a second. Then he smiled again. "Nope." He picked up his stuff. "Have a good night." He walked outside, and I watched him through the window. He was driving an old, dark, colored pickup. He got inside, started it, then he pulled away. I stood there watching until his tail lights disappeared. I remember thinking, what the hell was that? I immediately locked the front door. Technically, I wasn't supposed to lock it until midnight. It was only about 11:50. I didn't care. I turned off the pump lights, started counting the register. Every couple of minutes, I looked through the windows, and there was nothing. At midnight, I flipped off the large open sign. I put the deposit in the safe. Then I started finishing the closing checklist. That's when I noticed something across the highway. There was a vehicle parked in the dirt lot, lights off. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. I walked closer to the window, and it was that dark pickup. My stomach dropped. I couldn't prove it was the same truck, but I knew it was. It was sitting maybe 100 yards away, just sitting there. I stepped away from the window and I called Teresa. She didn't answer. I sent her a text. That weird customer from earlier is parked across the road. Then I called my friend Javier. He lived about 15 minutes away. I told him what was happening and he said, "Don't go outside." I told him I wasn't planning to. He offered to drive over and I said, "Just stay on the phone with me." For the next several minutes, I kept checking the parking lot. The pickup didn't move. Then, the headlights came on. It pulled out of the dirt lot, turned onto the highway, and drove away. I felt ridiculous. I told Javier, "He's leaving." Javier said, "Wait a minute before you go outside." Good advice. I finished cleaning, turned off most of the interior lights, checked the front door, then walked towards the employee area. There was a metal door in the back that employees use to take trash to the dumpster. I always checked it before leaving. I reached for the handle, then stopped. Something told me not to open it. I didn't know why. Instead, I looked through the little window in the door. There was a light above the dumpster. Beyond that, darkness. I couldn't see anything. I was about to walk away when I heard click. The door handle moved. I froze. Someone was on the other side. The handle moved again, slowly. Then, someone pushed up against the door. Not hard, just enough to test it. I backed away. I whispered into the phone, "Javier, somebody's at the back door." He immediately said, "Call the police." Then the handle moved again, this time harder. Someone was trying to open it. I ran towards the front and I called 911. I told the dispatcher someone was trying to get into the store. She asked if I could see him. I said no. While I was talking to her, the pulling stopped. Everything went quiet. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. I stood behind the counter watching the windows. Maybe 30 seconds passed. Then I saw movement near the side of the building. A person. Just for a second. They moved past the window and disappeared. I couldn't see their face, but I knew it was him, the customer. He had come back, and he wasn't in his truck anymore. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay inside. Then I heard something that scared me more than the back door. It was a tapping noise. I turned. Nothing there. Then, another tap. Someone was tapping on the glass. I couldn't see them because the side of the building was darker. I backed away. The man stepped into view. Same baseball cap, same denim shirt. He looked through the window at me. He wasn't smiling anymore. He lifted one hand and pointed towards the front door. Then he mouthed something. I couldn't hear him through the glass. I shook my head. He pointed again. Then he walked towards the front. A few seconds later, he was knocking. I could see him standing outside the locked front door. He pulled on the handle. Then he knocked again. I yelled, "We're closed." He leaned closer to the glass. "I left something inside." I yelled, "Police are coming." He stopped. For the first time, his expression changed. He looked towards the highway, then back at me, and walked away. Not running, walking. He disappeared around the side of the building. Maybe 2 minutes later, I saw flashing lights. A sheriff deputy pulled into the parking lot. Another arrived shortly after. I unlocked the front door only after the dispatcher told me it was safe. The deputies searched around the building, and there was nobody. Then one deputy noticed footprints in the dirt behind the store. They led towards the brush. They followed them to a short distance but didn't find anyone. I told them about the pickup. One deputy drove down the highway looking for it. About 20 minutes later, he came back. They found a truck parked farther down the road, but it was empty. It was partially hidden behind some brush near an old access road. They asked me to describe the customer, and I did. Then they asked if he'd said anything unusual. I told them everything. The cameras, the back door, whether I was alone. The deputy's entire attitude changed. He asked, "Did he see you handling money?" I said no. Then I remembered something. Earlier that evening, before Teresa left, we'd been counting part of the register near the office. The office door was visible from the customer area. I didn't know whether the man had been inside then. Maybe he'd driven past. Maybe he'd been watching. I had no idea. The deputies stayed until Teresa arrived. She came around 1 in the morning. I wasn't leaving alone. The next day, police contacted the owner of the pickup. It wasn't registered to the man I'd seen. It had been reported stolen 2 days earlier. Then they searched the truck. This is the part that bothered me the most. Inside, they found a pair of gloves, a flashlight, a large roll of duct tape, and several plastic zip ties, and an empty backpack. Maybe all of that had an innocent explanation. People keep weird things in trucks. But there was something else, a handwritten note. The deputy didn't let me see it. He told Teresa about it, and she told me later. Written on the note were several times: 10:30, 11:45, 12. Next to 10:30, the words, woman leaves. Next to 11:45, last customers. And next to midnight, lights out. He'd been watching the store. I still get uncomfortable thinking about that. Those questions were random. He wasn't making conversation. He already knew most of the answers. He wanted to know whether I would confirm them. They never caught him. At least, nobody ever told me they did. For the next several weeks, 2 employees closed together. The broken security camera was replaced, and we added another light behind the building. I worked there for another 4 months, but I never closed alone again. Eventually, I quit. For years, the thing that bothered me the most was wondering what he planned to do. He was going to rob the store? Probably. Was he waiting for me to carry a deposit outside? Maybe. But the money never left the building. If he'd been watching us long enough, he should have known that. And that's where my mind goes somewhere I don't like, because of what they found in that truck. Gloves, duct tape, zip ties, and an empty backpack. I try not to speculate, I really do, but there's one detail I haven't mentioned. When the man was standing outside the front door telling me he'd left something inside, I asked, "What did you leave?" He didn't answer immediately. He just stared through the glass. Then he said, "Open the door and I'll show you." I didn't, and I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had. Our second story tonight comes from a woman named Elena. In 2008, Elena was 21 years old and working evenings at a 24-hour laundromat in Las Cruces, Mexico. Most nights were uneventful. Students came in late. People getting off work stopped to wash uniforms. Occasionally, travelers used the machine before continuing down the highway. Elena had gotten used to being alone. She'd gotten used to the humming fluorescent lights, the dryers turning, and the rows of washing machines running long after midnight. Then one night, an elderly woman walked through the front door carrying a small laundry basket. She didn't seem frightening. She didn't behave strangely. She was simply the last customer of the night. And by morning, Elena would learn that there was one very serious problem with the woman she'd been talking to. She had died years earlier. This is Elena's story. My name is Elena. This happened in 2008 when I was 21. At the time, I was attending school in Las Cruces and working evenings at a laundromat. I won't use the real name. The place isn't there anymore anyway. It was in an old shopping center. There was a Mexican restaurant at one end, a little insurance office, and a vacant storefront and the laundromat. During the day, it was always busy. At night, not so much. We were typically open 24 hours, but an employee was only there until 2 in the morning. After that, the doors remained unlocked and customers could still use the machines. A cleaning crew arrived around 5. My shift usually ended at 2. I didn't mind working late. There was something relaxing about the laundromat when nobody was there. Just the sound of the machines, over and over. There were 20 washing machines along the wall, another row of large machines in the middle. Dryers covered almost the entire back wall. I still remember the number because I spent so much time staring at them. Washer 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Washer 14 was one of the older machines. It worked most of the time. Sometimes the lid sensors acted up. Sometimes it stopped before the final spin. But usually, if you hit the button again, it finished. The night this happened was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was always dead. Around 11:30, there were 3 customers. A college student doing homework, a man washing work clothes, and a woman with 2 kids. By midnight, all of them were gone. I started cleaning. I wiped down the folding tables, emptied the lint traps, swept the floor. At around 12:15, The front door opened. I looked up. An elderly woman walked inside. She was probably in her 70s, maybe older. Short gray hair, glasses, light blue sweater, long dark skirt. She carried a small white plastic laundry basket against her hip. Nothing about her seemed strange. She smiled at me. I said, "Good evening." She said, "Are you still open?" I told her we were open all night. She looked towards the washing machines, then asked, "Which one worked?" I laughed. "Most of them." She smiled. Then I said, 14 is usually pretty good. I don't know why I picked that one. Maybe because it was close to where she was standing. She thanked me, then walked over to washer 14. She put her basket on the floor, opened the lid, and started loading clothes. I went back to cleaning. After a few minutes, I heard the machine start. The woman sat in one of the plastic chairs near the back. I remember looking at her once or twice. She wasn't using a phone. She wasn't reading. She was just sitting there, hands folded on her lap, watching the machine. Around 12:30, I went into the little employee office. The office had a window facing the laundromat, so I could see most of the room. I started counting quarters from one of the change machines. Maybe 10 minutes passed. The washer 14 stopped. I heard it because when 20 machines aren't running, you notice when only one shuts off. The laundromat suddenly became quiet. I looked through the office window. The woman wasn't sitting in the chair anymore. I figured she had gone to the bathroom. I kept working. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no woman. I walked out. The bathroom door was open, and it was empty. I looked towards the front entrance, and there was nobody. Her laundry basket was still on the floor beside washer 14. I walked over. The machine was full of wet clothes. I remember thinking, maybe she went outside. Some people smoke while they wait. I looked through the windows. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no people. I went back inside. I didn't think it was scary yet. Mostly annoying. I assumed she had gone somewhere and would come back. At around 12:50, I heard washer 14 start. I turned around and the machine was running. I stared at it. I hadn't touched it, and nobody else was inside. I walked over and the lid was closed. The water was moving. The machine had restarted. I thought maybe the timer had paused. Like I said, it was old. I told myself that was probably what happened. Then I noticed something on top of the machine. A quarter. Just one. I picked it up. It was warm. Not hot. Warm. I don't know why that bothered me. I put it on the counter. At 1:10, the machine finished. The woman still hadn't returned. I opened the lid and her clothes were inside. A few blouses, a nightgown, towels, nothing unusual. I didn't want them sitting wet all night, so I moved them into a rolling laundry cart. Then I found something at the bottom. A little embroidered handkerchief. White. There were 2 letters stitched into the corner. RM. I placed it on top of the clothes. Then I called my manager. His name was Victor. I told him a customer had left her laundry. He said, "Just put it in the lost and found." I explained that her basket was still there. He didn't care. "She'll come back tomorrow." I said, "Okay." Before hanging up, I mentioned washer 14 had restarted by itself. And Victor laughed. "That piece of junk, I'm surprised it started at all." That made me feel better. Until about 20 minutes later, I was mopping near the dryers. Then I heard a clunk. Washer 14. I looked over. The lid was open. I stopped mopping. I knew I'd closed it. I walked over. The machine was empty because I'd already removed the clothes. There was nothing inside. I closed the lid. Then I heard something behind me. A dryer door. I turned. One dryer was open. I hadn't opened it. I started feeling uncomfortable. I told myself I was tired. Machines move. Doors don't always latch. Old equipment. Then another dryer door opened. This one was farther down. I stared at it. Then another. 3 dryer doors were now open. I grabbed my phone and called Victor again. He didn't answer this time. I had considered leaving, but my shift ended in less than half an hour. I told myself, "You're being ridiculous." I went into the office, and that's when I remembered the cameras. We had 4 security cameras. The monitor was beside the desk. I rewound the recording. I wanted to see when the woman left. I found the moment she entered, 12:16 a.m. There she was, blue sweater, laundry basket, and she walked through the front door. I watched myself talk to her. Then she went to washer 14. Everything looked exactly how I remembered. I fast forward. She sat down. I went into the office. Then something strange happened. At 12:39, the picture flickered. Just for a second. Static. When the picture came back, the chair was empty. I rewound, played it again. Woman sitting, static, empty chair. I slowed it down. There was no footage of her standing, no footage of her walking towards the bathroom, and no footage of her leaving. She was there, then she wasn't. I clicked the camera facing the entrance. The door never opened. My hands started shaking. I called Victor again. This time he answered. I said, "Victor, there's something weird happening." He sounded annoyed. I described the woman, and there was silence. I said, "Hello?" He asked, "What did she look like?" I told him, older, gray, short hair, glasses, blue sweater, dark skirt. Another pause. Then he asked, "Which machine?" I said, 14. Victor didn't say anything for several seconds. Then he told me, "Lock the office door." That scared me more than anything that had happened. I asked why. He said, "Just lock it." I did. Then he told me something. Before he owned the laundromat, it had belonged to his uncle. Years earlier, Victor wasn't sure exactly when, an older woman used to come in almost every Tuesday night. Her name was Rosa Martinez. She didn't drive. Her daughter usually dropped her off and came back when the laundry was finished. One night, Rosa finished washing her clothes and went outside to wait. Her daughter was running late. Rosa sat on a bench near the parking lot. She suffered a massive heart attack. By the time someone found her, she was gone. I remember staring through the office window at the white laundry basket. I asked Victor, "What did she look like?" He said he didn't know. He'd only seen her a couple of times. Then I asked, "Do you know what machine she used?" He said, "No." I looked at washer 14. I don't know why, but I already knew. Victor told me to stay in the office until 2. I asked about the woman's laundry. He said, "Leave it." So I did. At exactly 2, I grabbed my purse. I unlocked the office, and the laundromat was silent. I walked towards the front door. I had to pass washer 14. I tried not to look, but I did. The quarter I'd left on the counter was gone. I reached for the front door, then washer 14 started behind me. I didn't turn around. I walked outside, got in my car, locked the doors, and left. The next morning, Victor called me. I asked if the woman had returned. He said, "What woman?" I reminded him. He said, "No." Then he told me something else. The cleaning crew arrived at 5. There was no laundry basket, no clothes, nothing in lost and found. Everything was gone, except for one thing. Inside washer 14, they found a white handkerchief with the initials RM. I quit a few weeks later, not because of what happened. I was finishing school and found another job. For years, I told the story at parties. People either thought it was creepy or assumed I made it up. Honestly, I eventually started doubting myself. Maybe the camera glitched. Maybe the woman left and I didn't notice. Maybe somebody came back for the clothes. There were explanations. Then, in 2019, I was visiting Las Cruces. I drove past the old shopping center. The laundromat was gone. The storefront was empty. I hadn't thought about that place in years. And out of curiosity, I looked up Victor online. I found him. I sent him a message. We talked for a while. Then I asked, "Do you remember the woman at washer 14? He responded, "Of course." Then he sent another message. "You're not the only one who saw her." I stared at my phone. Apparently, after I left, another employee reported an elderly woman coming in late on a Tuesday. Gray hair, glasses, carrying a white laundry basket. She asked which machine worked. The employee pointed towards the middle row. The woman shook her head. Then she pointed across the room, towards washer 14, and said, "That one always worked for me." The employee turned away for maybe 10 seconds. Then she looked back. The woman was gone. Victor told me that after that happened, they finally replaced washer 14. They removed the old machine, installed a brand new one, and the strange things stopped for almost a year. Then, one Tuesday night at 12:16 in the morning, the new washer 14 started by itself. No clothes inside, no coins, no customer standing nearby. It ran through an entire wash cycle. When it finished, the employee opened the lid. Inside was one thing, a single quarter. Victor sold the laundromat a few years later. I asked him whatever happened to the old washer 14. He said he didn't know, probably scrap metal. Then he sent me one final message. Funny thing is, Elena, Rosa Martinez died on a Tuesday. I asked him what time, and he replied, 12:16 a.m. That's when I stopped asking questions. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's broadcast. 2 late night shifts, 2 last customers, and 2 very different reasons to be afraid of being alone after closing. Marco learned that sometimes the person who makes you uncomfortable isn't just passing through. Sometimes they're watching, waiting, learning your routine, and hoping you'll eventually unlock the door. Elena's experience was very different. Her last customer didn't seem threatening at all. She was simply an elderly woman who wanted to wash her clothes. But if Elena's story is true, that woman had made her final trip to the laundromat years before, and somehow, every Tuesday night at 12:16, washer 14 remembered her. So tonight, I'll leave you with this. If you're ever working alone late at night and the clock is getting close to closing, pay attention to that last person who walks through the door, because sometimes the scariest customers is the one who refuses to leave, and sometimes it is the one who shouldn't be there at all. Thank you for joining me for another night here on tonight's broadcast, A Place for Stories. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join me again for our next broadcast. Until then, lock the doors, check the cameras, and if an empty washing machine suddenly starts running behind you, maybe don't stick around to find out why. Until the shadows call again. Good night.